Welcome to the Wednesday, April 12th edition of the PFF Forecast. By popular demand, Seth is back, and so is my mustache. He asked for it, and whatever Seth asked for, we'd give him. We're going to rank the defensive linemen, see if we can do a slightly better job than Chris Sims. I'm not sure if that's possible for Seth, but he will try. And we're going to get into some other discussion around the quarterback cognition test and an update on draft props. Let's rock. Seth, you're welcome. I'm assuming you've taken many screenshots already. And just for you, buddy, anytime.
I'm back by popular demand. Your mustache is back by unpopular demand. There's supposed to be a drum set behind me that goes off right now, but yeah.
I hope that you have a soft spot segment coming up, and you have a soft spot for my mustache.
Yeah, well, it's my next week's pet peeve is right in front of me right now.
All right. One of my pet peeves is the rankings that we get from people during the draft season. Now, I should say this. I mentioned Chris Sims in the open. Chris Sims, a friend of the podcast. We've had him on here, met him in person. Great guy. He is not afraid to put his own take out there. I believe it when he says it. He does not look at anyone else's rankings. He does his own, and he does it by watching the film. That's what he does. He's not going to dive into a ton of data. He's going to watch the film. He's going to say what he thinks about it after looking at it. He does use some PFF data. So I don't want to disparage him, but he had some D-line rankings that were really interesting. So I think it makes sense to get into yours, Seth, because you watched them now, and you are a data and film guy. So your defensive lineman rankings are?
I still have to put, so I'm team Chris Sims a little bit in this one when it comes to Will Anderson, where there's obviously so much to like, and the grades are really good, and the pressures and all that stuff. He did it at a young age too. We love that. However, I just watch it. I'm like, I'm left wanting a little more for a guy who could be the 5th overall pick. And, without quarterbacks, he's the 1st or 2nd overall pick, right? He's supposedly that type of player. And I think I'm wanting more on his pass rush when he gets caught sometimes. And then it feels like that's it for the rep. He gets caught by the offensive lineman. The offensive line gets his hands on him. He's obviously not a big player. He tries to, mitigate that by the explosiveness, and he is. But I think sometimes he when he gets caught by offensive linemen, the rep ends there. And there are some other guys who you see like they're always trying another move. They're always trying to get off that offensive lineman, even if they don't win initially. So I think I still have him as number 1, but I kind of do agree that he's not this like can't miss surefire Myles Garrett type of player. I mean, I think we know that just by the size. And the other metrics, the high weight speed metrics like that. I really like Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. He would be my number 2. Just, one of these you can't teach size and speed and weight. He's huge. He's massive. I think your concerns are, and he tries moves. He's got moves. He does a whole bunch of stuff. You see him when he played against lesser offensive linemen, lesser teams. He could bully those offensive linemen. Like his bull rush against smaller guys he did what he's supposed to do, right? You're not going to see those guys in the NFL, but he did what he's supposed to do. Late bloomer, I guess, is pretty much the concern there. We only found out about this guy this year, and he's like 6'7". He ticks all the boxes physically. And then I'm going to go with, so I really like Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa. The red flags with him is he's played like 4 snaps in his career. So like it's a problem. Not being a full-time starter is a problem, but the tape for me, I love it. I think he has a lot of bend. I think he's got a lot of explosiveness in his bull rush. He knocks tackles back. Good run defender. Again, the red flag is like, okay, well, why Why is he not the full-time starter if he's going to be a top 15 pick in the draft? That's makes me a little nervous. And then the kind of three guys that I really like after Van Ness. Will McDonald, Iowa State. We never got to really see him as an edge rusher. He played inside for Iowa State. And like, look, you got to do what you got to do. Iowa State runs a very unique defense. So they want to put him in there. That's their business. I think if he had played full-time edge at a different school where they played with full-time edges, I think we would be really talking about him as a top 20 pick. Now it probably falls in the late first, early second, but I'm a big fan of him. Explosive, got a really nice spin move on the inside. Next guy, Felix Anadike Zoma from Kansas State. He reminds me a lot, like play style wise, of Aiden Hutchinson last year, who went, second overall. He's big and powerful, again, explosive, has an inside move, has an outside move. You love to see a guy who already has an array of pass rush. And, sometimes he doesn't extend as much. Sometimes he gets caught by the offensive lineman, kind of like I'm talking about with Will Anderson. And then really, really great run defender. I love watching guys when they get a block, when the run play is coming towards them, and then you get like that immovable force versus irresistible object, the offensive lineman coming at the defensive end. He does a really good job on those type of blocks. And the last guy, BJ Ojulari, brother of Azeez Ojulari, plays for the New York Giants, did not test well. And honestly, like, this is where maybe he's injured. People are saying maybe he was carrying an injury throughout these last few weeks, last few months. Did not test well at all, but got the whole bag of tricks. Can do every move. Speed rusher, gets to the quarterback really well. Again, another guy with like 3 years of really good play starting in the 2020 season for LSU. So I really like him. Off the board, not off the board guys, but kind of like in consideration. Is a guy like Nolan Smith and Myles Murphy. I think a lot of people have him higher than I do. I like Nolan Smith a lot because he's my type of pass rusher where he's a smaller guy, but he gets physical. And Myles Murphy just like 6'5", 6'5", 297, something like that. Big boy. Big boy. Didn't love the film though. I think he's one-track minded right now. But you kind of probably want to bet on the height, weight, speed there.
I know you get a jump, so I have just one follow-up question for you. So first, also, Ojulari, hamstring injury. I think that's been like made official now because I feel like I didn't think he was going to test incredibly, but I didn't think he was going to test that poorly. With Lucas Van Ness, there are two camps. I've talked to a dozen people about this. There is he should play 3 to 5 tech camp, and there is he should be like an outside linebacker, maybe still over the tackle, but more of a true, edge rusher outside. Are you firmly in the put him on the edge, keep him on the outside?
Yeah, I think he's an edge guy because I think he really is bendy. Like, I think you really can get to the quarterback off around the corner. So for me, I would keep him there. Surely it would be interesting because he does have some power. He's a pretty good run defender. So you could see him at an inside at 3 tech, but for me, he's an outside the tackle, speed power type of guy.
Gotcha.
You gave us your ordinal rankings. Get you out of here on this. Highest ceiling and highest floor. Who are they?
Highest ceiling, I guess we have to say Northwestern's Adetomiwa.
Good.
Because his metrics are out of control. He's not an edge rusher yet. Like the film is just like he doesn't really have all the moves, doesn't really have all that, but the jump is crazy off the ball and all that stuff. So high floor, that's for sure has to be the Northwestern defensive end. Probably that's highest ceiling. Highest floor, I might say the two guys that I mentioned at the end, Myles Murphy and Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith only because he's a football player. He just does a lot of good things. You drop him into coverage. He takes on pullers. He rushes the passer with a lot of moves. Like, he does all of those things. It's just like he might not do it all at an elite level, but I think there's enough there. He's like a stat sheet stuffer to a certain degree. So I think that gives me hope for him. Is he a first round guy, mid first round guy? Probably not. Late first round, early second, somewhere like that. But I think there's a high floor for him.
Love it. Seth, His pet peeve is my mustache. It's also his soft spot. We love him anyways. Follow him at PFF_Seth and enjoy the great takes on sandwiches to be served at parties. Among other things, Seth, we appreciate you. We will talk to you next week.
See you guys.
Before we move onward, a good reminder, as we talked about the rankings of players in this draft class, is that the PFF NFL Draft Guide has been recently updated. We've added more players, more data, and you can get it only on PFF.com with a PFF Plus subscription. New to the PFF Plus subscription is the completely unlocked, the most realistic draft simulator on the market. Teams use it. Why not yourself? Realistic trade simulation, as well as powered by the great mind of my wonderful podcast co-host and Timo Riske as well. So it is super realistic. You can draft all 7 rounds as many times as you want. You also get your draft graded as a part of getting your PFF Plus subscription. So highly recommend that you go get that. There's a 30% promo code right now. MDS 30 gets you 30% off and gets you all of those tools. Plus, sign up for a full year and you'll get all of the fantasy tooling and betting tooling as well for the next season. So go make that happen right now. No better time than this very moment. There's also 2 more draft guide updates still to come. So a lot to look forward to as we move forward. All right, Brad. That was by far the shortest segment that we've ever had Seth on. I think the key, we can't get him to stop talking, right? He talked for basically 90% of maybe 95%. The only thing that you can do, you cannot hope to stop him. You can only hope to contain him. And you can only do that by putting a time constraint on it, which he put on himself today.
Yeah, he did rip through it though. Like you said, once you shorten the window a bit, and then you just rip through some rankings, some good rationale why. I loved it. I think Seth also, you mentioned Chris Sims. Like I love and appreciate guys, and Seth falls in his bucket. Look, they might be off consensus. It's not anything to do with trying to create stir or pandemonium. The dude has his own opinions and sticks to them. And I do, I think Mike's the same way. I think Trevor, all the draft guys, are the same way. I think it's a very valuable component. It's easy to fall in the groupthink, bucket, and I don't think there's a lot of value in just kind of repeating what you see elsewhere.
That's the thing. There are 2 types of being off consensus. There's what you see on Bleacher Report, and then there's people that actually just have different consensus. And I don't mean to call out Bleacher Report specifically. I mean, just there are things that are off consensus because they're not trying to be, really good at what they're doing. They're just kind of putting out content for kind of engagement purposes. And then there are people that are just literally trying to do the best job they can. And to be honest, you need, I've talked about this with Eric many times in the past, Brad, which is the consensus only matters if it's built of individuals that are not that are independent of one another, right? And
right.
So if you have 10 samples of people with rankings, but 9 of them or the second one sees the first one and the third one sees the second one, and the first one, and all of those people are just really copying one another, then it's not a true consensus. It's just kind of diluted, if you will. So it is helpful to see a group of rankings that are truly not, kind of encumbered by others. Another person that I think does this really well from a quarterback standpoint is JT O'Sullivan, who's been on the podcast before, and he's really great. It's good to see that more people are starting to acknowledge his work. We should actually have him on the pod again because he's great. He's super funny. But we talked to him at length in the Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance kind of thing. And he had Justin Fields number 1. Now, I think most people would still take Trevor Lawrence, but the conversation was really good. And he had real reasons why he made it that way. There's a little bit of a quarterback kind of back and forth going right now. So I'm minding my own business, trying to get through the workday yesterday. And a Slack pops up that from you, and you are like, oh my God, there's been a change and who's going to go number 1 overall. Then a few minutes later, we're back on the other side with CJ Stroud versus Bryce Young. What can you tell us what do you believe right now about like what's going to happen, obviously at the top with quarterbacks and then the ramifications afterwards?
Yeah. So, and the preface, of course, is that I fully understand it's lying season, it's smokescreen season, all of those things. And I would also say caution people. The betting markets right now are so subject to there's the limits are small. Someone can go place a bet. And, I see all these tweets all day long. Oh, this guy was 10-1. Now he's 3-1. Like it probably is barely a signal at all, at least 3 weeks out, maybe closer to the draft when things move. Sure. But anyway, so we saw this market movement. We saw all these things happening. There were some rumblings. To me, that meant nothing. I was going to say, hey, you know what? That was probably 10 days ago. And I said, I'm going to try to get out there and hear things myself. And talk to people around the league, see if I can hear from people that, again, maybe they're lying to me. Maybe they're hearing things. Maybe it's not even lying, but what they're hearing is also different. But nevertheless, I've clearly been in I think this is going to be CJ Stroud camp for a very long time. I do think there are people in the building that still want it to be CJ Stroud. My understanding is, and I won't get into who specifically lands in which camp. I think maybe some of that stuff is rumored out there. There are two different groups in Carolina. One group wants Bryce Young and one group wants CJ Stroud. I do not think Anthony Richardson is on their board at this point. I think it is between those two players. And I think it's interesting. I think people assume who has more power in a building. I think it varies building to building. In Carolina right now, it's probably hard to tell, right? I mean, Look, Matt Rule was probably Scott Fitterer's boss. I'm not saying that as a fact, but that's kind of my read of the situation. Frank Reich should have a lot more cachet and more power than Matt Rule. But hey, maybe the regime also said, hey, look, we're gonna empower our GM. I think Fitter honestly has made a handful of decent moves when you can tell it's not, Matt Rule making sure a former Temple player is on the roster and stuff like that. So, and then also, look, some owners are very involved, some owners are not very involved. Yeah, I think David Tepper, at least in the beginning, was very involved. I think he's even said publicly, I'm going to try to keep my hands off it as much as I can, which I'm sure owners say all the time. But nevertheless, long story short, as of right now, and look, again, we know this is after a lot of market movement, all those things. I'm starting now to get the sense that maybe it is Bryce Young after all. The one signal to me was going all the way to 1. Kind of suggested that they probably did want to jump Houston. We do now also know that Houston was very close to getting this trade done and going up to 1, which to me signals you're trying to box out for Bryce Young, who is definitely their top prospect in Houston. So yeah, long story short, I promise I'm not trying to just, hear the trade wins and just buy into the, all the smoke going around. I try to do my own work. Maybe I'm wrong. But I do now think it's probably going to be Bryce Young first overall.
First off, nothing screams I'm going to meddle in the decision-making, like saying, this time around, I'm going to really try to be hands-off. Because that implies two things. The first is you feel the need to tell people about yourself. Okay, that's number one. The true way to not meddle is just to shut the hell up and, go sit on your yacht. The second is that you've meddled in the past. And then the proof is in the actions. And we know that David Tepper and his wife, I believe as well, took along with, I think, Frank Reich, and I'm guessing McCown was there and Fitterer was there too, but they were present at the dinners with the quarterbacks. And I think that says, that, I don't know, Brad, I'm guessing that's commonplace, right? The owner there. But what I'm trying to get at is I think the owner is in the conversation with any number 1 overall pick that's a quarterback. And that's their prerogative, and they probably should be. And so as I'm handicapping it, I do think that's important. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say that I think your point about the two camps are correct, and I'm going to try and predict what those camps are. My belief is that Frank Reich and Josh McCown want CJ Stroud. I think that all of the things that we know about how Frank Reich has picked quarterbacks in the past. I also think just looking at, we talked about how Josh McCown reacted to CJ Stroud, both on a podcast and at his pro day. I think those are the guys that want CJ Stroud. That'd be my guess. And I think that at dinner, I'm going to say that Bryce Young was more impressive. I'm going to say that, at the dinner with Tepper and his wife, Like, I think Bryce Young comes away from that and they go, that's the guy that we want to be the face of our franchise. That's just going to be how I think it is. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't think that you are making horrible guesses. I'll put it that way. And I would say this too. So those are
educated guesses, Brad.
Yeah, those are some educated guesses. I would also say, look, there are a lot of power players here. I think an underrated cog is also Samir Suleiman, who is the head of the football administration, which is contracts, but also his title is broader than that. I think he has hands in a lot of things. He came over from Pittsburgh. So for folks that don't know, David Tepper was a minority owner of the Steelers and finally broke off, wanting to get his own team. So jumped at the opportunity to own Carolina. And one of the first people that he brought over was Samir Suleiman, who I think has a lot of sway in that building. I don't know where, I don't know where any of them fall. I don't know where he falls, but I think his voice also certainly does matter. And the last point, you talk about the dinner and who impressed at the dinner. I want to say a couple things. First, we do know now that Bryce Young had this incredible score. You're hearing about it, I'm sure. It's called the S2 cognition test. Everyone's talking about it. It's probably in 10 years, we're going to talk about it like we talk about the Wonderlic and probably write it off. But right now, it's a huge deal, and everyone thinks that it's the secret sauce to solving an unsolvable problem that is the NFL draft. But nevertheless, a couple things. So first, Bryce Young did score off the charts. That's now public. That's been made public. There are rumors swirling that CJ Stroud did terribly on it. To my understanding, that is not true. He didn't do as good as Bryce Young. We don't know his exact score, and maybe make of that what you will, because we now do know that Jake Haener got 97th percentile and Will Levis got 93rd percentile, and no one has shared the percentile that CJ Stroud got. But the runner of the S2 cognition test said it was the best year in the history of their program, that everyone in the class did well, or I guess relatively speaking. So coming in fourth in this class might still be a good score. So I would say caution a little bit that, but nevertheless, Tepper apparently is a huge believer in this. He thinks it's a big deal and is very indicative of future success. Again, for folks that don't know, what this test really tries to look at is your reaction and how you can manage looking at different things. Like, it really is like reading a defense is the thing it's trying to replicate. And I think Bryce Young, it shows up on tape. He's a phenomenal processor. He did it at Alabama in structure, outside of structure, all those things. But anyway, I think that is, kind of weighing here as well. But I would tell people, to my understanding, the rumors floating around that CJ Stroud did poorly on the test, I do not believe that to be true.
So you can go to s2cognition.com and you can check this out. They have a website kind of all about it. But for those of you that don't want to check it out, I'm going to talk about it right now. So here's the overview they give on the website. S2's technology platform brings visibility to an athlete's cognitive skill sets and identifies their strengths, weaknesses, and the whys behind their performance. Here is how the process works. Athletes perform a 30 to 45-minute evaluation on a specialized laptop computer that measures how they process and make split-second decisions in their sport. The results are instantly revealed in a detailed report featuring the individual scores of the athlete's abilities, analyzing each of their strengths and weaknesses along with their overall S2 score. Below, and they show this chart, is a sample chart from a baseball report featuring the percentile ranking of an athlete's individual skill set, which equates to their S2 score total. The bottom of the chart indicates whatever. So what I'm looking at is basically they've got these different components. So for baseball, they have perception speed, trajectory estimation, rhythm control, timing control, distraction control, impulse control, stopping control, instinctive learning. I really want to know how they measure that. And then they have this overall score that is bucketed from a 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, and 80 to 90. And I believe those are just percentiles. So, a 90th percentile better than 90% of the people that take the score. The first question is, Brad, I think you and I both have to take it, and we have to figure out who the better athlete is.
Absolutely have to take it. We should try to get the football one in particular. So you mentioned baseball, the football one, the owner talked about it on a podcast recently where it's kind of like it's 3 to 5 seconds because it's basically trying to replicate a drop back. And that's all the time you have. I agree. We should take it, see who does well, see if we believe in it. Look, I'm not the greatest athlete, but hand to eye has always been solid. I struggled more with the, running fast, and jumping high, but I got good hand to eye.
Okay. So I think maybe that will help you out. Here's the question that I have. So this is great. This is wonderful. But you brought up, I thought, a really key point, which is this maps to what we've seen with Bryce Young on the field. Well, yeah, I would expect it to. And I would expect that what maps more to success is what you see on the field. So yeah, you have to consider all of the factors here. You can't just say, oh yeah, this is a good test because like I see some of the things that show up in the test on the field. Well, okay, great. But does that mean that the things you see on the test are more important than what you see on the field? And the answer is no, right? Or at least that would be my kind of gut reaction. So I'd be very curious as well, with a lot of these tests, and I think we've proven this to be the case with the Wonderlic, where it is not a predictor of future success, whether this is a predictor of future success. And I think that's that piece that's really interesting. And I'm going to dig in a little bit more and see if they have any data on this, because otherwise you're just kind of selling sort of a fool's gold or snake oil.
So super tiny sample, but they've mentioned that Brock Purdy did very well. I think it's a great data point for them that, of course, they conveniently trot out now. Justin Fields also apparently got a perfect score. And we love Justin Fields. He could become a good player. He had the slowest average time to throw in the NFL last year. So, again, he probably did maybe so good identify that his receivers were never open. So maybe it does track, and he's actually just that good at realizing he does not have windows to throw into. But again, like, it's still so early. I shouldn't have gone so far and said we're just going to completely ignore it. But here's the thing, too. It's in its infancy. I know for a fact that it's only like half the teams have it right now. I believe there was a rule in the beginning. They will only give one team per division at one point, because obviously you want to have an edge. Here's my thing, though, and this applies to any standardized test. If players now are going to say, okay, well, apparently these teams care so much about this, and Bryce Young went first overall only because the S2, they're going to start training for it, and then it's really not going to mean all that much. If you can just, in the same way that ACT, take 100 ACTs in a row, it's a formula. You're going to do well eventually. I'm sure it kind of, it's a little bit different, but to a degree, you could probably replicate it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Anything that's going to, at the end of the day, the same thing is true, right? Hey, how do you decide who you're going to take? Well, it's the players that play well. Oh, well, they're going to train really hard to play well in the games, right? It's like, so where are they putting the most of their time into? It's like, it's playing on the field. That's why some of the things like the combine, for example, players obviously train for that pretty hard, but it's like, yeah, okay, is that going to overrule what I saw on the field? I maintain and I trust obviously the data that we collect at PFF, but that points to Bryce Young being the better quarterback. And, I think we talked about a lot of different things. And at the end of the day, what you want is the biggest sample size of the most reliable data that's out there. There's a reason that all 32 NFL teams are PFF clients and use PFF data pretty extensively. And the place they use it the most, by the way, and I can say this with a lot of confidence, where they leverage the data the most is the draft, because it is such a comprehensive view of how a player has performed at the college level. And that is coming from the games that the players play. And it's also done across the same same information space as it is done for the NFL players, right? So you can actually map, and it's one of the things that Eric and I looked at, the big guy first in our draft analysis, is which of the kind of components of play translate best, or the best predictors of success in the NFL. And one of the things that you quickly realize is that it's very hard to predict anything, right? That's really challenging as well. And there's so many contextual pieces, but there are a lot of pieces of PFF data and analysis that do a really good job of projecting players. We've talked about this a bunch. There is probably no better place than on the defensive line and on the offensive line at how well players are going to perform, especially because we can get scheme specific there, and we're able to capture so much of the play. But quarterback is right up there with it in terms of what we're able to capture as well there. So I say all that to say, like, it's really interesting to talk about this stuff. And at the end of the day, if we make too much of it, you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
For sure. And just the last point on it, I had one person mention, and it kind of ties in what you just said, that they would view it, and I agree with this thought as I've kind of molded over, like, if you're between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud or whatever, two quarterbacks at the top that were phenomenal college football players, yeah, trust the tape and trust that they know how to read a defense because they just did it for a couple of years. And obviously you can poke holes in that to a degree. I actually think the application of like a Brock Purdy is where I probably would put more faith. Let's say I'm sitting there in the late day 3 and I'm between 2 prospects. I'm like, hey, well, you know what? This kid is apparently very, very good at parsing through information and reading things. So I'll take a flyer on him as opposed to a flyer on a guy that just maybe was a better athlete than the guys on the field at the college level, but wasn't very good at those things. But yeah, when you're talking, top 2 pick, like you probably should just trust the film and other things, in that realm.
Now, whether you want to trust the books or not, Bryce Young is minus 270 to be the number 1 overall pick on FanDuel. CJ Stroud is plus 200. I want to remind people, okay, I should have shouted out the Discord earlier. Go join the Printing Press Discord. We talk about this stuff nonstop. Any news that breaks, any news that Brad or Arjun gets, we drop it in there. So for example, you would have had, if you were in there, Panthers at plus 450 to pick number 1 overall, and you would be very, very happy with yourself right now. But if you would listen to Brad on this here podcast, you would have Bryce Young at plus 300 to go number 1 overall. So Brad holds a 3-1 ticket on a guy that's now minus 270. He will be drinking closing line value whiskey as he watches the Chicago Bulls lose in the play-in game to the Toronto Raptors tonight. And so that is, congratulations, buddy. Good job.
You must be forgetting that the Bulls acquired the GOAT of play-in games, Patrick Beverley, who's about to jump on the scorers table and swing a Bulls jersey around. Round 2, baby. Look, there's no one better in the play-in game than Pat Bev. This
is true. It's all over my social media, his reactions in the play-in game. It's so great. I watched it's the first NBA game I think I've watched wire to wire was the Lakers play-in game. I'm a Lakers fan, I know. It was one of the hardest games to watch. The Lakers stink. Okay. The Lakers are not good. The Minnesota Timberwolves are the most, I can't imagine being a Timberwolves fan. They shot 50% from 3. They were 16 for 32 at one point, and then immediately just self-combusted, started taking contested 2s, started trying to run out the clock with 5 minutes left in the game. So good. So good. The fact that they managed to lose that game and be gifted a foul at the end of the game on Mike Conley when he was fouled, hitting the side of the backboard on a 3. Absolutely spectacular. The only thing I will say about the Lakers, and I don't think they're going to win the NBA championship. Let me be very clear there. But they're playing the Memphis Grizzlies. Memphis Grizzlies are going to be without Steven Adams, who is a very good defensive big man. I could see Anthony Davis just destroying the Memphis Grizzlies in this series. And so I don't know that there's value on that. I think they're plus 116 or something because everyone bets on them, but there could be some value in some Anthony Davis overs, some kind of, SGPs there would be where my head goes. Your Bulls are down 4 right now. They're plus 5.5 on the live line.
I'm not going to be taking it. I'll watch it. And I'm not, they shouldn't even be in the game. I'd rather they actually be in they don't have a lottery pick, I guess. So look, they are the definition of purgatory, which is as bad in the NBA as it is in the NFL, maybe even worse. The Davis point's interesting. Obviously, Jaren Jackson was like a decoy candidate. But I think maybe you get a little bit of value in that because he to me is like an off-ball decoy. Maybe I'm just wrong, but a lot of the highlights that I saw of him is recovery plays or being the help. If it's an actual matchup with Anthony Davis, I think you would have wanted some Steven Adams in the mix. I don't hate that idea at all.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So Jackson is height and weight wise very comparable to Anthony Davis. The difference is that Steven Adams is bigger than Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
And more physical. And what does Anthony Davis struggle with is strength and physicality. He's he's notably gets injured very frequently. So I agree with you. I think it's much more of an off-ball thing. And it's just fewer bodies to throw at him. If they have both those guys to put dudes on him, and Anthony Davis is going to get tired. If it's only him and Jaren Jackson, maybe Jaren Jackson is the one that gets in foul trouble. That would be something that I would look at too, is think about live betting that. Jaren Jackson picks up, an early foul, maybe not an early 2 fouls. I might bet it right after he picks up 1 early foul, anticipating the second one, because maybe the lines will move once he picks up the second. Let's get back real quick to the NFL draft though, because if we know that's happening at the top, what do we think then trickles down from there?
So that is the thing too. And this is where it gets interesting. Again, trying not to totally overreact to what people are saying, but I've been saying this for a while. We have been as a podcast. I do genuinely believe that if Bryce Young does go first overall, the Houston Texans will either take a defensive player, I think it's going to be Will Anderson, or try to trade down from 2, maybe hoping someone else wants to come up for CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson or whoever. So my bet, though, is really, if it's Young first overall, every mock you've seen in the top 10, throw it out the window. But I do think Will Anderson is very, very likely to be the second overall pick. I think you can bet. I know Arjun shared it in the chat list at one point. If the bet's still out there of exact order 1-2, Bryce Young, Will Anderson, when he shared it was 100-1. I doubt that exists anymore because obviously Young is not a favorite. But if it's still like, decently plus odds on Young, Anderson 1-2, I would probably bet that. And then it gets very interesting in Arizona. They obviously put out to Adam Schefter that they have 6 teams that have called already. But I just wonder at that point, like, do teams start to say, hey, well, you know what? These guys might fall. Like, do I need to trade up because there might be a couple guys available? If I'm Indy at 4, we'll take Richardson or Stroud. Like, we don't care. We'll take whatever guy falls or Levis. So anyway, I think then you start looking at, like, does Tyree Wilson or Christian Gonzalez go 3rd overall? Then at 4th overall, do the Colts just staying at a quarterback? Do the Seahawks, if they're sitting at 5 and Anthony Richardson without a trade up is available, do they take him? Like, if it is Bryce Young first and you want to start placing bets, like I said, everything you've seen about mocks in the past where they all start out Stroud Young and it's all clean and tidy, ignore all of that and fade all of those bets because I think it becomes mayhem right away.
So is the idea that Houston just not going to take Stroud?
I don't even know that it's, we have discussed that, there is the connection between the agent that represents Stroud also representing Watson. I don't think it's just that. I think genuinely they might have a guy like a Levis, graded higher for them. And I think they maybe don't feel the need to take him at 2 overall. I mean, I think it's silly. There's like these things now. They'll trade up to, Ian Rappaport, obviously a guy we respect with a great deal, but mentioned today the teams that could trade up to 3. He mentioned Houston, and they were going to pick back to back at 2nd and 3rd overall. If Nick Caserio does that, good Lord. So I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, so I don't think they're going to take CJ Stroud. I really don't. And at that point, like I said, the trades get complicated too, because Indy would say, well, we're not going to trade. We'll just sit here. The wheels start to fall off pretty quickly.
Yeah. Mayhem, I think, is the best word to describe it. Overall, number 2 overall pick odds. CJ Stroud is plus 115, Will Anderson plus 250. Bryce Young plus 340, Tyree Wilson 7-1, Will Levis is 11-1, Jalen Carter is 19-1, Anthony Richardson is 29-1 to go number 2 overall.
That's real long to where, like I do think the thing too, and this
he's plus 110 to go 3 overall. He's the favorite to go 3 overall. Right. He has 29-1 odds to go 2 overall.
Right. So, that does not add up.
Like if there's a team that wants him and that isn't picking, at 3, a team trades up to 3. Like, why would you not go up to 2?
That's the thing, right? No, if you're, Las Vegas or, even we said Seattle, Detroit, Las Vegas, Titans, whatever. Like why wait? Because I'm not going to call it a bet, but the disparity there is ridiculous.
Yeah. And if a team, let's say the Texans, because we've heard this before as well, right? That the Panthers wanted to move to 3, but the Cardinals offer was like as much as asking as much as the one to go to 1, right?
It sounded like they maybe overplayed their hand a little bit. Yeah.
So, maybe the Texans are like, hey, we don't really care. Like, screw the Cardinals. We want to make sure we're able to get more draft capital. And, Bryce Young was our guy and he's gone. So that's interesting. What do you know about the view on Will Levis?
So I do think there are some teams that like him and maybe have him as, QB2, QB3. But I'll tell you, when you ask people, if you had to predict one guy of the big 4 that falls out of the top 10, you're going to hear Will Levis as the answer 90% of the time. Like he is the guy where I'm trying to think of a good example of someone similar recently, but he is that name that keeps coming up. There's a reason why Daniel Jeremiah mocked him 19th overall to the Buccaneers a couple mocks ago. Like, that's not by accident. I think it is possible that he's the guy that falls.
Yeah, that it makes too much sense, and I think we've already talked about the over 4.5, under 4.5 quarterback selected prop. I mean, if Will Levis is falling, then good luck with Hendon Hooker. I know that Kuiper, I think, believes that Hendon Hooker is going to be a first-round pick, despite saying that he's like a second or third round grade. Thinks the team is going to trade up for him, which I think is kind of interesting. But if you see I think there's a legit shot that every quarterback slides.
Legitimately, well, no, seriously, if it's Bryce Young first overall, I think it's possible that all three other guys slide. Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah. And then I think, then it becomes really interesting, because who are those position players? I think we're going to learn a lot about, we've talked so much about the quarterbacks, and really the only other positions that we've sort of talked about, is kind of the Tyree Wilson, Will Anderson thing. But, we're going to learn a lot, right? What do teams think about Jalen Carter? I mean, number one guy on a lot of people's boards before he, got fat and did illegal stuff. The corners might come into play, Gonzalez and Witherspoon. And then, what about JSN, right? I don't know. Do you think Skoronski moves up?
I think he's maybe the one of those names. I think the corners, I could be way off, but I think Gonzalez and Witherspoon, I would say 7 for both of them as a floor. I think the Detroit Lions, the Las Vegas Raiders at 6 and 7. You could even argue maybe Seattle just says, hey, let's get another outside corner. They re-signed Michael Jackson to a 1-year minimum deal. Yes, Kobe Bryant is there, but he played in the slot for them last year. I mentioned Arizona. If Arizona trades down to 7 with Las Vegas, they probably just maybe take a corner there. So those two guys, I definitely think will go top 7. And then Skoronski, I do. It's interesting. I think teams they like the idea of a Paris Johnson, of a Broderick Jones, of a Darnell Wright out of Tennessee. But I think Skoronski is kind of in a cut of his own, which is interesting because, of course, some teams probably view him as a guard only. Other teams probably say, hey, he's a tackle that maybe becomes a guard, whatever. But I do think he is kind of in a class of his own. It could be, again, a top 6, type pick.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's been a wild draft season, and there's still 2.5, 3 weeks to go. So a lot still to play out. Do you think there are any moves kind of left to be made before the draft? Any big moves left to be made before the draft?
It's a great question. I think maybe Arizona's trying to make that happen, wondering let's not even let the board fall. If we try to, make this move before anyone gets picked, and that way we can maybe pull something. Because to me, I'm not going to say it's desperation. The Bears also, had it be known they were shopping their pick. But, for Schefter to say, hey, 6 teams have called, it's something. It's clearly, Arizona trying to put it out there. So that would be the only one. Is I think Arizona with either Las Vegas at 7 or Tennessee at 11. That's the only thing I foresee happening before the draft starts.
What about Rodgers?
So here's the thing with Rodgers. I think it's most likely he gets traded. I'm starting to wonder, the Jets and the Packers are 2 picks away from each other. The Jets are at 13, the Packers are at 15. Maybe there's also a scenario where you wait till draft day and then the board falls a certain way, and the Jets maybe or the Packers say, okay, let's use a pick swap as part of this Rodgers trade. I think the Patriots and the Packers at 14 and 15, they both need edge, they both need receiving talent. And maybe that's where we get a run on, the Miles Murphys, the Nolan Smiths of the world. And maybe we start to get some of the JSN and Dalton Kincaids also starting to come off. And so, whereas the Jets do not need pass catchers and do not need edge rushers. So it kind of makes sense to me. Maybe that's what they're waiting on. I'm just trying to, grasp at straws and think of why this deal has not got done yet. Maybe that's one theory to pontificate.
Yeah, that's interesting. We're all in the dark waiting to come into the light.
We are all in the dark.
On Aaron Rodgers. All right, that's our podcast. We'll be back on Sunday evening. By the way, golf this weekend, RBC Heritage, very cool. John Rahm, normally the Masters champion, withdraws week after because they're still drunk. John Rahm is playing in the RBC Heritage this week because, quote, there are kids out there who might have been coming to see me, and I want to make sure that they can see the Masters champion. It's awesome. People's champ.
He's a legend. He's a legend. Real quick. We have boots on the ground. My dad is at the tournament. We'll be there for some live betting opportunities. So if we get any insight, because he's following someone around and thinks their swing looks pure, I'll let the Discord know. Secondly, Patrick Cantlay, I'm betting him to win it. He fell apart for us on Sunday. He's always been on my no-fly list for betting, so I'm just going back to the well. But around the green is the most important metric at the RBC Heritage at Harbortown. Great little course in South Carolina. He is 10th in around the green strokes gained so far this year. And I don't like using success at the course as a metric, but he's finished top 10 there 4 of the last 5 times. So he plays very well at Harbortown.
And he has a very unique weapon, which is he plays so freaking slow that he throws other people off their game. I believe they would put him on the clock here, but if you're in the last group, that generally does not happen.
Exactly.
So you'll be in good shape. Patrick Cantlay is on my no bet list because I can't stand the guy.
Strong agree, trust me. But the data supports it.
He's like, Bryson DeChambeau now just sucks, which is awesome. So I got to find someone else to fade, and it's Patrick Cantlay.
Trust me, I'm with you. But
what makes it even worse?
Ignore that for the betting purposes.
The only thing that makes it worse is the fact that he is ignorant enough to wear a Goldman Sachs hat. Like, hey, what are you doing, bro?
Whoever's paying the checks, man.
You can't find a normal thing to put on your hat. Just
get a financial institution
or somewhere.
Yeah. Or get a financial institution that does dirty things, but no one knows their name, so they don't recognize it, right?
Yeah. Maybe what he should do is wear one of those vests that says Goldman Sachs on it. Like every single person in finance.
They give it to you when you get your desk. There's a vest waiting for you. Yeah,
they give you a vest and the name of a Coke dealer. That's what you get.
Welcome to GS.
Yeah, welcome. We'll make sure you're ready to go for your 85-hour work week here. Anyways, that's our podcast. We love you all. Enjoy the RBC and all the basketball, and we will see you on Sunday night. Peace.